Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. With me in studio this morning is Dan Okach, an advocate of the High Court. Stephen Gikonyo is a political and governance commentator. Eric Deuri is an advocate of the High Court as well as the former president of the Law Society of Kenya. Gentlemen, thanks for staying with us here on the broadcast. Yes, Dan, before we went on a break, you wanted to say something?
Yes, when I was in this show last week, and even after, I've told people that once a court issues an order, it has to be respected. And you see, I'm happy when you refer to the deputy president, you are saying the impeached deputy president, not former. The only former person here I hear you are talking about.
Former Law Society.
Former Law Society. Because that is the position unless the courts decide otherwise.
Yeah.
However, on the issue of time, as my co-panelist is saying here, you know, law is regulated, you know, and any space that is not regulated is anarchy. So there is a point where there was an issue, even as to the time when you can swear in a president and a deputy president. There was an issue. And that is because it was said that a president was sworn in at night. So that lacuna itself, anything, in fact, the good book says anything done in darkness is wrong. So we had to regulate. We couldn't even follow the laws given to us, but we came and now had to give unto ourselves a law specifically regulating that space.
Okay.
So even for the courts, a court will ordinarily not work after or render itself after 5 unless you have special permission from the CJ. So there are many cases which have even gone on appeal on the aspect of why are the courts sitting past time. Anytime we are in court, we are told by judges, you know, we are almost reaching 5. So the issue I'm indicating here is that there's a lot of an issue in terms of how the DCJ acted. Because for this bench, first of all, you remember there was an indication by Rigiji's lawyers that they wanted this matter mentioned on Friday. This bench said there is no problem, no hurry, we can always deal with anything on come Thursday. All of a sudden, within the weekend, there is all this rush, files are moved and everything, and you find that they are being told to sit yesterday. And I don't blame the bench because those were directions given. But where the problem comes in is when you are told that these directions, you know, if there was an operation during the weekend, you're operating now through the CTS system. And that is normal. Anything happening, you can audit. If these directions are not on the CTS system, there's a big question to it. And this matter is still in court, I know. But that question came out very clearly yesterday. It is not on the CTS system. So this is where we come back and remember that the DCJ has come out in the past and said, you know, based on my decisions, I've been hounded by government. There was an attempt hit at her and her driver. So it leaves a lot to be desired when you find that such actions, juxtaposing with the issues that the DCJ has had, comes up at this time. So if this process is to start anchored on such a questionable ground, I don't think it serves justice, because the tenets of justice is that justice must not only be done, but must manifestly be seen to be done. So you must give confidence, even if, and you know, this is where we are separating the courts from what has happened in the legislature.
Okay.
Legislature.
Politics from the law.
It was so, and I saw a very misleading headline yesterday that, you know, there is politics and the law, and politics always wins. That's a fallacy. The law must always win, because the law, and it is clear under Article 1, you know, is the supreme law.
All sovereign power.
Article 3 binds everyone. So these must count for something. But when it comes to the position that Parliament, of course, rushed this process, there are a lot of issues which have been raised. The same thing happened in terms of the Senate. There are a lot of issues which have been raised. But we cannot afford to have those questions or those issues or those complaints being now placed on the judiciary.
But again, Stephen, does this, I mean, still on you, Dan, doesn't this seem to be raising the integrity questions as to how Parliament undertakes its business, because what we are dealing with now in our courts of law is as a result of a political process at the bicameral level, and somewhat to some degree and extent, it appeared shambolic if you look at what transpired on the 4th and the 5th of this month in October, how the public participation exercise was undertaken, and the extension given for an extra day by the court and the directives to the effect that this should happen across the constituencies on the 5th. I mean, it seems whatever the political establishment touches seems to die, or questionable issues are raised as to how they undertake even clear processes that the Constitution prescribes a solution towards.
You know, there's something that I can tell you that Parliament, and that is both the National Assembly and the Senate, have let this country down. And you come from a community that has, you know, it's very difficult to differentiate parliamentarians from, you know, these sheep and goats where you have the lead, you put like a small kengele, and wherever it goes, the rest will follow without question. That is your parliament for today. And that is why you find that there are clear issues where parliamentarians, including very senior colleagues in the bar, sitting there, very clear infractions that they should help. You know, there's no need of going through a process when it is so mad with irregularities, yet you are part of it and you are not questioning. The same thing happens when we have laws. You saw when there was the issue of the Finance Act, there is already a problem here and there, but all these people voted regardless. The same thing is happening at this point. And for you to know that sometimes maybe they even know that they are wrong. I remember when we were dealing with the impeachment of Mike Mbuvi Sonko.
Yeah.
The Senate voted, and it was live, one person after one person after one person, one senator after one senator. This one, I think in the nature of the fact that, you know, it's collective wrong, they just, you know, vote electronically and you see it on the other end. Yet they don't know that Kenya is so advanced that within a matter of minutes, we had the list of how they voted.
And the grounds.
And the grounds. Now, many of them, I saw immediately after that, many coming and saying, oh, people are being given money. Others have come and said, no, we were summoned and we were threatened and we were, you know, this is a whole person who was voted. That already is an impeachable admission.
Yeah.
But this is the person voting to impeach another one, who is now saying, me, I didn't even use my medulla oblongata. I was actually just forced. Me, in fact, I was paid. And this is a person voting to impeach another one. You know, they actually lose their salt, their place, and it is a mockery of the constitutional architecture and design in terms of checks and balances. Okay. But to finish on that point, you then say that every other person can be wrong. The parliament can be wrong, executive can be wrong, but the last bastion becomes the judiciary, which we cannot afford. I always tell people, there's a reason why it's chapter 10 and the others chapter 9 and 8, because it is the last bastion, a sieve mechanism. If this fails, we don't have a country, and that's the determination that ought to we should have. And I don't think, even when the courts say that maybe it has started on a wrong footing, it is a very bad thing to say so. I'd rather that it ends even with a decision that the process was okay in terms of parliament, but the judiciary itself ends up being clean, not being part of the muddied waters.
And Stephen, how far will this then test the guardrail in our system, which is the judiciary, given the instances that have transpired since we promulgated our current constitution, and again dealing with a political consequence of a political process? And how far do you think this can stretch the limits of our judiciary and embolden it as one of the firm pillars that holds our democracy?
From where I sit, we are going through an evolution in the sense that we are now testing Constitution 2010 and what it means in our society and everything. So in terms of where we're going, I'm not afraid of what it might do to the judiciary in the immediate term, because this is a process that cannot be exchanged with anywhere else. In other words, we're going through it as Kenyans and as a country, and we're looking to see how does this help us, or how can we fix it. So anything that comes out of this process provides an opportunity to make things better. Now, there's no question that people are very discouraged by what they see happening and disappointed by what they see happening within Bunge as a whole. But at the same time, this is the system that we have and the process that we have to go through. So parliamentarians will make their comments out of turn and without consideration to the impact of their words. But this impeachment is also showing us that you have to weigh what you say, because you can be tested with impeachment. Now the question is, who will be tested with impeachment? Now the question is, who is going to pass a motion to impeach another parliamentarian, for example, on the basis of their utterances? We are going to see that depending on where you sit in the ecosystem.
An MP can be recalled, not impeached, is it?
Yeah, well, sorry, I meant, you know, this will be spread across.
A template for other leaders.
A template for other leaders. Now, in terms of what you've just raised about an MP being recalled, I think you're aware that it's a very untidy process for the voter. One, you have to wait at least 2 years before you bring a recall motion or effort or petition. And the other is that it has to be 1 year before an election. So when you look at how things flow generally, it's next to impossible to recall an MP. So some of those things, if they're important, need to be put into test or question and fixed. But who's going to fix them? It's the MPs who write the laws, and the court interprets it. So perhaps we should focus on the things that are most critical and important. But what I'd like to say, and I've said it before, is that if we can move things this fast, we can develop equally as fast. So we've seen breakneck speed in this matter, and it's unprecedented, it's dizzying, and everyone including the process, including your kawaida or regular citizen, is also getting worn out by the long hours and waiting. Yesterday I was sitting with 3 o'clock. Tomorrow seemed too long. You know, yet there's so much to be considered. So that's where we find ourselves.
But again, Stephen, if you look critically or examine how this process happened, how statecraft was deployed in getting rid of Rigathi Gachagua, who now is impeached and is before court praying to the judges, it tells a lot, is it, about the questionable way in which government deals with other issues, including issues of service delivery, as you have pointed out, when it comes to giving priority and a focus to such areas, given how our healthcare system is, our education system, and largely our infrastructure. Does it not raise then questionable processes where the government seems not to be paying attention to issues that affect mwananchi, but when it comes to fixing political problems, then that's done with a Ferrari speed?
You know, it's an interesting mix, because if, for example, the state doesn't fix the state of affairs, in as much as that is related to the deputy president and the president not getting along, then where does that leave everything else? You know, we have the potential to destroy our nation if we don't fix our political discourse and realities. And so our problem is that so many things are happening at the same time. And in fact, we've done quite well. Listening to the arguments and exchanges yesterday is an indication of significant high development in our thinking and our legal processes. However, at the same time, you still see cracks even within the legal fraternity, a display of an absence of regard or respect for the court and each other in the quest to make your argument heard. So this is a societal problem where we have sometimes condescending conflicts or comments on each other. Did you go to school? You know, shut up. Those are things that we expect not to see in a courtroom. And we also expect to see penalties for such behavior, but we don't. So there's many things we need to fix. And it's a matter of saying, which one do we need to fix first? Okay. Or which one will have the most impact?
And Advocate Deuri, given what's happening and of course, the eyes which were yesterday cast on the three-judge bench and the arguments in the court of law, it seems they're also handling a political problem. And in this manner, to contextualize what Stephen has said, that the class seems to be dealing with its political problems so very fast and at a jet speed. But you look at issues that are pending, for example, questions that were raised over how procurement processes were done with the Indian conglomerate Adani in the JKIA deal and also in the healthcare sector, and also concerns about our education system, our infrastructure. It seems if you counterweight that with Rigathi Gachagua appreciating all his shortcomings and statements that were at odds with his office and some even out of the logical sense, seems there is a complete no attention to issues that Kenyans are facing. Because if you look at the taxes, if you look at the state of our affairs, it requires more attention from the government, but the focus seems to be on political affairs than the common man who wields power overwhelmingly so under Article 1.
Yeah, that's true. You know, we have said it, and I think it has. It's something that will often be repeated between now and the next election. The verdict that has been passed on Parliament, the verdict that has been passed on Senate, I think is one that they are going to have a big problem trying to overturn. I remember when I was watching the proceedings in Parliament, in view of the public sentiment that had come out, you know, there was this mood of saying, you know, we are dealing with this, we are dealing with this, we are dealing with this. But ultimately, we have to look at the process and the end product. And I think that's where we are having a problem on some of these things, looking at the issues that the country feels need to be addressed. Okay. And the effort that is being put to address those issues. So I have a feeling that going forward, the standard to which the Senate and Parliament are going to be held with is the people are going to be asking them, how can you resolve something this quickly? And when it comes to this other thing that is so important to us, you take so much time to deal with it. And I've always been very clear in my mind that the impeachment of the Deputy President was going to create far much more consequences on the entire political establishment than was probably seen at that particular point. And this is coming to bear. And you can see the place that the judiciary is finding itself. Because in my view, and I think I may want to disagree a bit with my friend Gikonyo here, the judiciary did the right thing prior to the impeachment of the Deputy President by exercising restraint, because that is what the Constitution requires it to do. Exercise restraint, allow those processes to be carried on, because the Constitution has reposed those functions in the institution of the legislature. Yeah. But after it has been completed, then it comes to the judiciary, and it has to be dealt with squarely by the judiciary. The problem we are having is that there appears to be a false start. And so there'll be other things that we'll be looking at. For example, we all know what courts have said on so many of the questions that are perhaps before the court. If you ask me, and that has always been my position, eventually I have a feeling that the interim orders will be discharged, because I try to counterbalance all those arguments that are in court, and I think that it will be counterproductive, in my own view and in an assessment of the law, to have a deputy president sitting in office by virtue of a court order as a result of a process that may have been done wrong to impeach the deputy president. Because ultimately, and this is the most interesting thing, because in nearly every country where an impeachment has been done,
yes,
the question of how to deal with politics and the question of the law has always been a very tenuous issue. And in certain countries, for example, like the US, the judiciary has sort of put its hands off in terms of interfering with that impeachment process. But we have a different constitution that requires the judiciary to get into play. So the challenge that I am always grappling with is this, that if you are a political leader and you are so unpopular within the political establishment, should the court sustain you in office?
Okay, so that's the case basically of...
that for me is what I think ultimately the question would be in the interim. In the final analysis, there are other greater questions that will come into play in terms of the process, in terms of all those things. But what we'll be aiming to look at, for example, even if the court were to discharge those orders in a manner that I think eventually they will, the question would be, how have they handled themselves to that extent? So that if you arrive perhaps at the right decision, but it is obviously manifest that they were wrong considerations in arriving at that right decision, then the entire process is impeached. It is exactly what happened in Parliament.
All right.
They may have arrived at the right decision, but the process was so impeachable that the product in itself eventually cannot hold.
Justice Maraga said in 2017 that the process is as important as the outcome or the event, the final event.
Yes, and that's why I'm a bit shocked that none other than our former president is actually captured, because if he's the one who is saying that according to him, regardless of how wrong the process is or was or manifestly is, it is still okay to see off this particular individual. I disagree totally, because this particular impeachment process is for a deputy president. It is, we say mutatis mutandis with what will happen to a president. So whatever we are saying now, whatever standards we are setting now, are standards that will apply to a president if he's undergoing impeachment. Remember, a president and a deputy president are given the mandate by the people for 5 good years, by everyone in terms of majority that vote. So to that particular extent, it cannot be said that the only consideration for me tomorrow to say that I don't want to work with this person is because all of a sudden I don't like his color, all of a sudden I don't like his tone, or all of a sudden people are saying this guy is ugly. So you marshal everyone and say, we are impeaching him, he's not presentable to the international community. That then falls short of the requirements and of impeachments, or the sine qua non of the impeachment processes and our constitution. Because if you read the 3 grounds, there are serious grounds that you cannot just belittle them and say that the end justifies the means. Therefore, it cannot then be said that an individual, even if it is the president himself who says, I don't feel like I can work with this person, he still, that alone cannot be enough reason to say that despite the fact that you've used a wrong process, this person should still exit and you bring someone else. What guarantee do you have that this someone else will not undergo the same process? What guarantee do you have that tomorrow Rigathi Gachagua gets a bigger following and Raila Odinga, maybe if he doesn't make it to the AU, decides that I want to be president, and then he uses his numbers and Rigathi's numbers to also impeach a president on such flimsy ground? You are actually attacking the will of the people and taking over that will. It is a very, very serious precedence that we are going to set if we are going to say that, and especially for the court, that we have agreed that this process is a sham. But because these people is not liked in these corridors, let him stay out. That is different from what we say in labor laws, that you can actually decide that you can't force yourself as an employee. It is very different because this is a constitutional position given to you through the constitutional processes. And
one of the major grounds that the impeached GP's team is making an argument on is the process of public participation. The quantitative and the qualitative aspect of it, and the presentation of that report by Emilio Odhiambo at the floor of the National Assembly. It then appears that floor of the National Assembly. It then appears that our judiciary is, by virtue of listening to the prayers that are made and the arguments and the submissions before it, though it will make a determination on the matter, will also look in hindsight at the conduct of Parliament and how it has done that. Then doesn't this then bring on the question of supervisory jurisdiction on issues that have happened? Though, as advocate argued, that in the case before the matter was brought before the Senate, conservatory orders were denied the party that prayed for, because Judge Chacha Mwita said the matter be dealt with at that level, then whatever comes out of it can be dealt with by the judiciary. It's where we are now. But in hindsight also, Duncan Okach, how then is it that we are calling on our judiciary to look into the political conduct and behaviors of our political class? Because they're questioning grounds that Gachagua's team is presenting is how we have conducted the public participation. There are questions on the manner in which that was conducted and who conducted it. The outcome, the report, the quantitative, the qualitative aspect of it, this being a key principle in our governance structure, then are we throwing too much at our judiciary, especially political affairs that seem not otherwise be somewhat not its mandate? Yes, all parties can appear before it nonetheless.
You know, there's a time where in this country people always assumed that, you know, the executive will always have their way, the judiciary will always be muzzled, and politics will always win. Until that day that Maraga uttered the words that he said, that fidelity to the Constitution is very important. And the aspect of process is key. It doesn't matter. And none other than a presidential election was nullified on those grounds. We set our standards so high at that particular time that it cannot then be said that again we want to go back to a position where it will be business as usual. Let me tell you, the aspect of public participation is the heartbeat of this nation and the Constitution. Such that if someone plays it or takes it, you know, as a sham, makes a sham out of it, it cannot then be said that the judiciary will just sit back and not look into it. What happened at that particular point is that the court said there is time for everything. There'll be time for this matter to be interrogated by the courts. This court, either this bench or any other that, depending with the decisions that will be made pursuant to the two applications, will interrogate all those issues which were brought. And that's why I'm saying people forget and think that the issues that were raised in terms of the National Assembly is water under the bridge. No, it's not water under the bridge. All from the point where the motion was signed and tabled, okay, to the point where the Senate Speaker was making a declaration, everything must be beyond reproach. If there is a problem in that process, there is no way to rectify, because the verdict there will be one. this falls short of the glory of our Constitution, and it cannot then stand. What that happens, the implication of that is that it reverses everything back to pre-tabling of the motion. It then means that all this wastage of money, and I'm seeing the budgets here, and I'm sure the government is budgeting. We'll wait to see how much it has used in this process, whether it was budgeted for or not. But all said and done, it means that at the end of the day, if someone took the country through a mockery of a process, expending taxpayers' money, and knowing very well that they are actually violating constitutional tenets, then even that must count for something at the end of the day. Someone must be made to pay. Because once you decide you're impeaching the deputy president or the president, it must be so serious a thing and so proper a process that even impeaching it in court becomes a very high, a very difficult process.
Okay.
But for now, now that we are already in court on, people are already in court on this particular issue, these are some of the findings that will help the Constitution to grow. Remember, we have never tested this particular provision in the past. And I've always said this strength of the Constitution is always known by when you test an article that protects the rights of Kenyans.
Yeah.
So it is good. This is one of the ways that we'll always say our Constitution now is so strong that it can fight back if it is Theuri, that they don't like his name and they think he should be Otieno, and they want to impeach him. The Constitution will fight for him.
Okay.
Ayub, let me respond to something.
Yeah, briefly, I need to go to
because Okachia made an allegation that I've been captured, and I think that you know, one of the things that as lawyers we value and we should never castigate anyone on is having an opinion on something. And let me say why I said what I said. That there have been several impeachments across the world. There was an impeachment that happened in South Korea of President Park. The issue around that president was the question of corruption. There was an impeachment that happened in Brazil. I think President Rousseff.
Dilma Rousseff.
Yes, Dilma Rousseff. The issue around that president was the fact that having implemented certain policies that were extremely unpopular with the people, she had to be removed from office. And that is why I was saying that when you look at what has happened across the world, look at South Africa, for example. What happened is that there were, Jacob Zuma was facing dwindling public fortunes, and there was this other investigation that had been done by the public protector. And so in all those impeachment, yes, there are legal grounds, but sometimes, and often you will see that in play if you look at all that, that where a leader loses political confidence of the establishment.
In the case of Brazil.
Yes, even in the case of Brazil, it becomes easy to impeach that person because he does not have political legitimacy. That was the point that I was making. I was not saying that the impeachment of the deputy president in the manner that it was carried out is proper. And that is why, in my own estimation, ultimately, I expect that the courts will find that that process was wrong. But there are the question that I was addressing, and which I think Mr. Okach perhaps did not understand, is at the interim, what should happen? And I thought that in my own estimation, that the court will look at certain things. And one of the things that the court have always consistently said, and I know Okach knows this, is that when it comes to holding public office, there is no right. There is no, what you would call like a right of a birthright to hold that office. Now, if you are to put that vis-a-vis the constitutional prestige of the office of the deputy president, meaning that if something were to happen to the president today, it should be very clear what happens tomorrow. Yeah? Because if something were to happen to the president today, it is not very clear what is going to happen tomorrow? If the court is looking at all those considerations, chances are that it may weigh in favor of having a more predictable answer to the question, what happens if something happens to the president today? That is at the interim. But in the final analysis, what we expect is that the court will look at the entire process, and to be quite honest, I would be surprised if it does not find
a fault.
that process was faulty.
Okay, and let's now talk about that process. Stephen, coming to you, because and also the case of Giorgia Meloni, the current Italian Prime Minister, who is as well balancing her cards both at home and also at the EU level. It's all about politics. She loses her relevance at the EU Parliament, then at home because of the coalitions she has with some parties that border on the far, others far right, others on the left. Then the likelihoods are that in a parliamentary system she can easily be ejected out because they go with the popularity aspect, and of course similar instances that do happen. But Stephen, given the conduct of parliamentarians, and you recall when the finance bill, when they passed the finance bill, the very same day Parliament was breached, the head of state issued an address in the evening late, and then the following day he came out conceding that he will withdraw the finance bill. It's until then that they had found their voices again, because they were unable to travel even out of the city, because they were literally turned into social pariahs. Today again, there are reports that a majority of lawmakers cannot go back to their constituencies because of what transpired in Parliament. What does then this harsh verdict from the public, given the public participation exercise on the 4th of October, when there was the element of what does that concept tell us about the harsh verdict the public is giving the political class and majorly parliamentarians, and a majority of them skipping even Mashujaa Day celebrations in their home constituencies where the events have happened? What does this say about the conduct, and are they guilty of what they're undergoing, or should we see them from different perspectives and lenses?
I think it's a little bit of both. One, the problems that Kenyans have been talking about or desiring to be resolved are ever present. They're still there. And so when these other processes begin, there's a tendency to feel left out or feel that you're not hearing what we're conveying to you in terms of what your priorities should be and what ours are. And so there's a disconnect. And when we come to the period of the finance bill, there was so much happening in that period, from pronouncements of additional taxes, complaints and pushback from the citizenry saying that we do not want this tax and that tax. I remember what they were calling the circulation tax, which was very unpopular, telling people that we are going to tax your vehicle at 2% of its value, whereas you already paid duty, you paid for the plates, you're paying insurance, etc., and there is no help coming to you to maintain that vehicle, yet you're going to be taxed at 2.5% of some estimated value. So people pushed back, and there was not a voice hearing what people were saying. And sometimes if you hang out with the same people over and over again, you believe the stories that you tell one another. And yet that could be very different out there. And so there was an appearance of insensitivity on the part of parliamentarians as they were pushing the finance bill. And consequently, it appears that people organized against it, and there was support because of how everyone felt about the economic status of the country, the dwindling status of their businesses, and the prospects of investments were going down. So there was need to listen, and that listening was forced. Now, you cannot fault someone, although they're late, for seeing the light and saying, okay, we are not proceeding with this. Because, in fact, the argument was that we've heard you and we've removed the contentious issues, and therefore we should be good to go. But there was, no, the whole thing has to go. Yeah. Right or wrong, the whole thing has to go. We're still going to know or understand the consequences of the absence of the finance bill as presented with the contentious issues removed. So there's a need to have tentacles everywhere to understand what's going on. In this present time, there's a lot of confusion and misunderstanding, misinformation in the public arena. So there are people who are being told this is being done so as to alienate Mount Kenya. Others feel that this is being done to punish the deputy president. So, and everyone has a position related to what they're hearing and what they're saying. For us as a country...
Misinformation in the context of the impeachment process?
Yes.
Yeah.
On one hand, the parliament, for example, the legislature, feels that they did the right thing and they brought all these charges against the deputy president. The senators, the trial chamber, reviews those and says, okay, we don't agree with all of these, but these 5 stand, and therefore he stands impeached. So then there's the expectation that the court will restore, review the process, find fault, and give Gachagua back his job. The reality, from where I sit, is that that now creates other problems. As you saw even yesterday, getting to the issue for which the bench was empaneled took forever. It's almost like never got started.
Mm-hmm. It's a whole day. But...
Arguments about process, arguments about how we go forward. And that's the same thing out there. There's an expectation of something will happen. If it doesn't happen, right or wrong, people are going to take a view. Yes, that's deserved, and no, that's unfair. And the danger we have is that there are people sitting waiting to demonstrate or show their views on either side. And so that's what we have. We have to temper everything we say and everything we do on how do we manage our country going forward.
But if you base the reasons as to why some at the moment are unable to visit their constituencies to the misinformation around the impeachment process, what then would be the justification why they were unable to do so when the finance bill was defeated?
No, people felt a certain way, and even now they feel that way. I watched a panel on another station where one of the senators was accused of having voted yes, and yet they're mandated to vote yes, no, or abstain. You know, so that's their constitutional right to do so. So you should not decide that because you don't like what someone did, then they therefore deserve to be beaten up, because we have chaos. You could speak here this morning and somebody outside decides he didn't like what you said or how you said it, and therefore they need to burn your car. You know, we have to show restraint, we have to remain orderly, and we have also to be bound by the Constitution. If we agree that the supreme law in this land is the Constitution, then that is where we anchor everything that we do.
And the point, the argument I'm making, Stephen, is that we have a house that is dead against what the people want. And we live in a setup that's a constitutional democracy where when that mandate is accorded to the representatives at the bicameral level, the expectation is that they prioritize what ails the common mwananchi, be it healthcare, be it education, and how our systems work. But here you have a house which, despite the granted power of even impeaching a sitting president, and controls the power of the past in making allocations, because it's through the parliament that all that should be done, that is supplicating at the feet of whoever occupies State House, in this case, President William Ruto. And we have seen the degree and the magnitude he has infiltrated Parliament to control members of Parliament, even mentions them by name and says the constituencies they do represent, even before the elections. Doesn't that tell us or raises the red flags on the conduct of our parliamentarians who don't question the executive on very pressing matters? For example, look at the deafening silence on Adani, for example, and the failure to question the process we have arrived at in the case of the tech deal for our party. Doesn't then therefore give the justification that Parliament is here because of the childish obstacles it placed on its way in not focusing on Monanchi, but focusing on where power oscillates, which is State House?
That's a tough question. But nevertheless, it points out to all the issues that are affecting us today. If you look at it politically, the question of becoming president or winning the presidency has a lot to do with networks. It can be argued, and rightly so, that President Ruto pretty much set up his team in 2013. He was involved directly in the process of selecting who will represent the party then in this parliament. Some have since left parliament, they've been voted out. But nevertheless, it shows you the extent to which he looks forward and determines his pathway from there. And it is in that consequence of that approach, of that outlook, that you have a lot of support. If we look back a little bit while he was deputy president, there was this conflict between he and the president. He denied it throughout. He denied there was a problem. He said, mimi ni mtumishi wake, hatuna shida, etc., right to the very end. But people have asked, why didn't Uhuru impeach him? And people are not identical. They're not the same. Also, was there time enough to gather the networks necessary in parliament to bring forth such a motion? We saw people like Duale removed from being majority leader. House committees yes, were removed and changed and so on. But it did not go to the very end and follow the impeachment process. I think President Ruto and the other members of parliament took a chance, and they decided these are the issues that we're going to bring, and there's a lot of issues that we'll bring, and something will stick, if not all of them, something, and this is where we are. Now, in terms of disaffection or disappointment in parliamentarians, that's a given throughout. There is no place in this country that people don't feel a certain way about their MPs. The question is how much the citizenry understands about the processes of parliament, about the parties that bring these parliamentarians to their seats there, and also about whipping them to take action according to what the party's desire or the party position is. We see that also in the United States. When we talk about occasional crossing of the party lines or the political divide, people are bound to vote according to their parties.
All right, except in circumstances where there is a bipartisan approach to some issues, including immigration and policies regarding America's foreign policy largely, which is interest-driven, and the constant support for the case of Israel, for example, whoever becomes the occupant of the White House. Wakili Okach, is the damage Parliament has done unto itself self-inflicting, given what the papers are reporting this morning of how they have become prisoners of fear after the DP impeachment? About 2 months ago, they were overrun by the Gen Zs who felt that what they were doing wasn't right in supporting the passage of the Finance Bill 2024. Is there an understanding amongst parliamentarians that we no longer have an all-powerful or overmighty president, though the head of state retains significant political and legal power, but is subject to checks and balances in a case that is very different from what we had under the old Katiba? And when do you think they can better understand that, given what lies ahead for them and because of the instances that we're witnessing at the moment before the next elections?
I think, Ayub, the main problem, of course, the legislature is supposed to be the main aspect of checks and balances in terms of the executive. The kind of leadership that we have in this country, based on the constitutional architecture and design, is what we call a triumvirate. Where we have architecture and design is what we call a triumvirate, where we have three pillars in leadership. We have the executive, we have the judiciary, and we have the legislature. So these are the leadership aspects in this country. And they, within themselves, are supposed to create the checks and balances. But the problem comes in when we have also what we call an opposition, Opposition ideally will give government new ideas, will challenge areas where there are problems. And many at times people have said whenever the opposition crosses over to the ruling side, either through a handshake or through this by, they're calling it what?
Broad-based.
Broad-based, which is still a handshake in many other words. It creates problems. People said when Raila had that handshake with Uhuru, the people who suffered are the people of this country. Because there are so many things that, of course, Raila, once in opposition, helps the country and we corrects the government. Although it is also always said Raila was not born to be in the opposition or to always do that, especially when he's never rewarded whenever people now go for the general elections. So at this particular point, I think that's also part of why there is a problem. Because now, in terms of the opposition, they've also gone to the side of the ruling party. Therefore, the people feel...
Were they welcomed or they went there?
You know, the problem is once you call us for your marriage, it is very difficult to start saying who would who. You would each other and you're already there.
Where did you get to know each other?
Where did you get? You're already there.
But does indeed, but as you proceed, Advocate,
yes.
But does it not raise fundamental questions of moral authority, given what President Ruto said at Chatham House in the UK, that the coming together of Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga created a mongrel, and he said it's difficult at the time to differentiate government, and he said that in a capital that a lot of bureaucratic decisions are made, including how the world affairs are managed. And here at home, he also emphasized on the same as to why the Jubilee Party shelved its Big Four agenda because of Odinga coming into government following the events of March 2018, and him now welcoming Odinga, even giving him 4 slots in cabinet. What does it say about the moral authority of our leadership between what they say and how they say and what they do?
Ideally, and I will take, in today's standard, there is what they have as quote of the day. And it says, don't find fault, find a remedy, anyone can complain. So it's so easy to complain. And this is what happens. Once you're on the outside, it's like football. You can always say, this person should have done this. It's so easy. But when you are given that chance, you'll be so shocked how difficult sometimes it is. So I think that's the wake-up call that the president got. Because he may have, of course it is on record, he said we will not have such an arrangement, but sooner than later that happened. But again, we've said that one of the issues that led to desperation and led to these Gen Z protests the fact that people say that we can't trust our government starting from the president because he says this and tomorrow it is this. So I think it also means that, and those are some of the lessons that I think we should have taken and started correcting, that whatever we say, these Morara issues, whatever we launch, whatever we promise, let us see it through. And it's not only for the president, it's for the leadership itself. But the bigger question comes in terms of our leaders. We can sit here and blame Senate, we can sit here and blame Parliament, we can sit here and blame the President. But remember, we always have that chance to make that decision after every 5 years. And that is because it is the power that we have. That's where we can demonstrate. That's where we can say we will now have a problem with this Senate, with this politician. So when we go and make the wrong decisions, when maybe like now I saw the church over the weekend, crying here and there, yet the religious leaders, including the Muslim community, they actually took a position in terms of who to support. So at a point, it means that, we get the leaders that we deserve. We cannot then blame God, we cannot blame anyone. It is for us. And the most important thing is that we need to make corrections. But the problem with Kenyans, you will notice, come 2027, they will say, tunataka huyu mwizi wetu, tunataka huyu mkora wetu, tunataka huyu, because, and then at the end of the day, before even the chickens come home to roost, they're already fighting. So I think these are lessons that with civil society and with the lessons that we are going through, we should reach a point where now people will understand how serious it is and how much the leader that you elect will affect you at individual level in terms of your social upgrade, social welfare, economic welfare, and even family welfare. It affects you directly. It is so important that that decision is not just a matter of going there with Githeri, standing and casting a ballot and taking a picture. It is actually you are deciding what your fate will be for the next 5 years and maybe beyond.
All right. Advocate Daure, also will sample the feedback and see what the public is saying, is the flip side of this conversation is the man who holds the mandate or wields the sovereign power, who is the Kenyan voter. And it appears at every electoral cycle, despite all this playing out in the public gallery, I mean, the political class is doing all this. There's no shadowy conspiracy about it. It's playing out open and in public. But it then appears that the voter the voters miss that opportunity in giving the mandate or according the same to the people who have the integrity and who can lead this country to prosperity. I mean, what then needs to happen at that stage? Does it take civic education? Because if you look at how the Gen Zs have translated the finance bill into all the local dialects, then we certainly are not short of education. But is there an underlying problem that needs to be fixed on the part of Monanchi to get the right people to lead over us? Because those who are in parliament are us. They are cut from all of us, 4 of us seated here, and the millions of Kenyans. So how can we fix that problem at the ballot?
It will be very, very difficult to find a solution to fix this in the first instance at the ballot. Because you have to remember that politics, people are persuaded on so many considerations. But I think one of the things we need now to take a critical look at is the manner in which we are ethnically mobilized to vote for our candidates. If we can take a different look at that and say that then our considerations should now start to move more towards merit than supporting our mutu wetu, who would be doing justice to ourselves. But let me say this, that we definitely don't have extremely bad legislators. I think that what we have are situations where you have extremely good people, but they are choosing convenience, political convenience and political expediency over implementing the governing tools that they have. Because you have a constitution upon which you assume power. And when all of them come into office, they take an oath and they swear that they will uphold the constitution. And to just add to the other pillar of government that we have, in Kenya we have the 4th pillar, which are the independent constitutional commissions, which are supposed to ensure that the constitution is implemented and is implemented faithfully. But what we are seeing is that there's been an abject failure even in the 4th arm that was created by Kenyans in the constitution to ensure that there is a check on the 3 arms of government as they exercise constitutional authority. So that also is something that we must look at. But the one thing I want to say that in this context is that the judiciary does not enjoy the luxury that the executive and or
Parliament,
the legislature enjoy in terms of interpreting the law to their own convenience. And I want to say this, that the judiciary has cut a niche in terms of being able to look at the government and tell them, on this you are wrong, on this is what the law says, on this is what the law says, and we are wrong. And we hope that that legacy can be sustained. Because in the face of a parliament that is completely unable to discharge its constitutional authority with regards to oversight for purposes of political expediency, the only recourse we can have is the judiciary.
Right.
And so I hope that the judiciary, even as it goes through this process, will be able to acquaint themselves and show us that in this country, the Constitution is alive and it speaks.
Yes.
And which will perhaps then be a greater hope and incentive. But one thing I also look at and I feel like there is something that is different in Kenya that has happened before, is the level of exposure, is the level of information, and the fact that, and if you look at what happened to even when the finance bill was going through, the analysis that was there on so many different issues.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that Parliament, the institution of Parliament as it is, both Parliament and the Senate,
yeah,
will find itself in a very difficult position going into the future, because they will be asked questions and they will not be able to run away from those questions. And I foresee a situation where, going into the future, their visits to their constituency will continue to be much more painful than it currently is. Okay.
Let's now sample the feedback, and I'll take your closing remarks after hearing from Kenyans. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Babu Michael says this impeachment of the DP, the whole process from both houses to now the courts, is historical. What all Kenyans should know is that it's setting precedents for future processes like this, and so shouldn't be taken for granted. Justice must be done. Remy Butia says the Constitution is being put to test. Our Constitution cannot be interpreted as a legal-centric letter and text. It is a document whose text and spirit has various elements built within its content. MC_Ruma says, what still baffles me is the speed of Gachagua's impeachment. Everything was shambolic. Parliament lost its legitimacy after Gen Z protests. It's now the rubber stamp for the executive. Judiciary is our last line of defense. Tough times ahead. Remy again says, I think the Gachagua case, with the Constitution's value of patriotism, I conceive that it requires the judges develop the law in a way that responds to the needs of the people and to the national interest. Engineer Lazaro says the Gachagua legal battle exposes loopholes in the Constitution. For example, how will a three-judge bench deliver rulings over what has been debated and concluded by both parliaments, in this case, the lawmakers? Yes, Stephen.
And what is the question?
Yeah.
I was paying attention to what you
were saying. Was coming to the point as well. And this is in relation to as well the historic events happening and given generally the scorecard by the people for their government, and going to a very historical election in 2027. A large chunk of the voters' bloc, of course, expected to be young Kenyans and the pressing problems which they have complained about so consistently. What do you think will then change our dynamics of leadership, given what has transpired the past 2 years and going into the third year now?
I think there is a whole lot that's been going on in terms of even systems that are being introduced that people are still acclimatizing to. There is also an expectation, interestingly so, that people in leadership have to be knowledgeable and they have to understand what it is that they are doing there. So the citizenry or Mwananchi is very disappointed when their leaders appear not to know what they're doing. And that's from the parliamentary leadership to government leadership in terms of cabinet secretaries and to some extent permanent secretaries. So Kenyans are pushing back and saying, we elected you expecting this, of their immediate leadership. And so the push is ever present. One of the challenges, of course, is we tend to change our leadership every elective cycle, or at least 70% of them go home. This time it might be even more. And by the time a newcomer gets in the system and begins to understand how things work, then he's on his way out. So the ones who remain are maybe 25 or 30% remain for a second, third, and perhaps even a fourth term. So there's a lot going on in terms of expectations. And parliamentarians and leaders elsewhere have to understand that there's an expectation and there's a due date coming up at the election. But one of the things that this impeachment has brought forth is that even cabinet secretaries can be taken through the same process. You know, it's like a vote of no confidence, for example, in the presidency. It can happen if there's one who has the wherewithal to push such a motion. But for CS, you've seen contentious instances where even in the previous regime, CSs were stopped going to parliament because there was a view that when are we going to do our work if every day we are being summoned to parliament. I expect that we'll see a change in that. But there's also issues of if you don't do what I want you to do, then I'm going to sponsor an impeachment motion against you, and so on. So the discipline of remaining constitutional and being guided by the law is where we must be.
Okay. Yes, Dan Okach. Although this current parliament had voted to impeach the former agriculture CS, Mythical Nturi, over his handling, and then he was later on saved following the report by the committee which had looked into the matter. Yes, Dan Okach.
Yes, I think on that one, the end product of that is that Parliament did not vote to impeach Mythical Nturi because they still went with what the special committee said. So, but that tells you the problem with this Parliament when you can't compare that, and these other. It's so bad that they can't start. But nonetheless, there's a saying that says that it is during our darkest moments that we must focus to see the light. Even at this particular point, it is good that we are in this particular constitutional moment, because through this, a lot of things will come out, and this will be light. And that's why we are saying the judiciary, and I repeat for the third time, the judiciary should live up to its bidding. There is no room for the judiciary to get it wrong, because when they get it wrong, everything then goes to squambles. To my brother and my president, Eric Theuri, when he spoke at first, I was a bit shocked, but he actually qualified, and I think I will withdraw the remark. Yeah. He's not captured. We are in that season where you see if a whole parliament and they come and admit, you don't know who has been reached, who has not been reached. I'm seeing a lot of silence from our law society. Now we are seeing the issues of the repatriation of the refugees, which is so bad. There are things that now, this is the time, where during the darkest hour, during the time of torment is when you'll know how strong you are as a society. Yes, yes. So I think it is good what is happening, and I think all said and done, Kenya is still winning because we are testing the strength of our constitution, and we are actually going to see at the tail end of it, and I'm sure we'll come back to this studio and say all is well.
Yes, Advocate, briefly.
Thank you. Ayub, I want to say that for me, I think what is happening may have a silver lining ultimately. And the first thing it will do is that it will illustrate the contradictions in leadership. That when politicians want certain things to be done, then they'll be done at lightning speed. And when Wananchi are saying that we think that this is a problem, then there will be excuses, there will be, there is no budget, there is no all those things, there is no all those things. That illustration of that contradiction is something that, in my view, will mark the tenure of this administration and ultimately may decide the future of the politics of this country. The second thing, and I want to agree with Okacho on this, is that this process will test the independence of the judiciary. And we hope that ultimately the judiciary will come out with its head high in terms of how they will handle this process, because if they fail, because the politicians will find their answer in 2027, the judiciary, if it fails in this process, at a certain point, there will be an answer to them, because the manner in which the judiciary takes accountability is different from the manner in which politicians do. But make no doubt that this process will have consequences on the executive, on the legislature, and the judiciary. But the good thing is that each has an opportunity to make that judgment for themselves. It is just that the enforcement of that judgment will come at a certain future date.
Thank you. Eric Dauri, advocate, former Law Society of Kenya president, thank you for your time, much appreciated. Stephen Gikonyo joined us for the first time. Good morning and thank you for your analysis. Political and governance commentator Dan Okachi is an advocate of the High Court as well. And thanks to you too for waking up with us here on the broadcast. The hashtag on X has been Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at IUP. Abdikadir, up next is Health and Lifestyle with Safina Chiangauma, and I'll see you tomorrow morning here at the same time on the State of the Nation. Till then, good morning.